owe you lunch.
Sounds like a plan. And you're live.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you can start by logging into the MLS. Yeah. That's okay. You can follow along up here, and anyone else, maybe you can sit next to someone else who has MLS access. Okay. Having difficulty connecting?
Well, I'm getting Google, but then says there's no internet connection. So I don't know. Well, there it is right there. Okay, now it's showing up.
Just type in capital KW, lowercase password. No, lowercase password.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the login. You already have that.
Oh.
So you just need the password right now.
See you?
Yep.
Oh, KW password 439. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Christen. How are you?
What's up, baby?
Lots of stuff.
This class is going to be 2 hours today?
I don't know. So one of the things I want to address, especially because we have a larger class size, is I feel like in my classes we get really off topic and we ask a lot of questions. So if you have a question that is directly related to what we're working on at that time, I'm happy to answer it. Please interrupt me. If you have any technical difficulties, please interrupt me. It doesn't make any sense for us to not all be on the same page. And I want you to learn from this, and I'm happy to stop and make sure we're all together. You know, that's how we grow and work best, is together as a team.
Sweet.
So let's keep any questions that aren't directly related to what we're working on to a minimum. You might have questions in relation to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in relation to criteria as far as how to qualify property to work in your CMA. I'd like to keep those at a minimum as well. So right now I'm going to help you with some of that, but we're going to focus primarily on the main functionality of compiling one, the main components of qualifying properties to use in that CMA. I'm going to show you using Cloud CMA platform, which is free to all of you through the MLS. Mine may look a little bit different because they can be customized to show your contact information, your photos, things like that. I'll show you a page where you can add and remove information, preview the content that's there. So please, after class, I make myself available as long as I can to answer any other questions, okay? All right, so we're gonna start. In order to use Cloud CMA efficiently, you first have to identify a subject property. So for purposes of example, I recently closed a deal where I repped buyer and seller. That address, and you should write it down if you have a place to write it down, is 2708 Greenfield, Greenfield Avenue. And that's in LA 90064. You won't need all of that. But we're going to use this for all intents and purposes as our subject property. Let's say we're going to pretend we're going on either a listing presentation, or we are going to be preparing a buyer offer and we need to prep comps for our buyer prior to discussing the terms of that offer and offer price with them. Okay, so the first thing I do is I'm going to go to search and public records. The reason for this is I want accurate information on my subject property. So you can either use RealTax or MLS Pro, and I do like one better than the other, but I can never remember which one it is.
No, that's RealTX.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, they always say that in the class.
Okay.
RealTax?
And every time I do it, it's the wrong one. I don't know how that's even possible, but every single time. All right.
What was that under? It was search and what?
Public records.
Search, public records, MLS RealTax. You're gonna get a pop-up window, and I don't know why some internet browsers, they ask you for permission every time they wanna run Flash. So you may or may not have that extra step or screen in there. If you don't, good for you. Bimo, come here. Come here. Come lay down. Continue. Get in the Dima bed. All right. So, I think our internet connection is a little slow because we're all in here together, so bear with me. So since we know the property address, we're going to pop it in here. If you have difficulty locating your property address, less is more. Take out suffixes like north, south, east, west, or prefixes, excuse me, and take out suffixes like avenue, boulevard, street. Okay, so anything that you're looking for, if you have the numeric portion, just this portion, and the main street name, even if there are multiple streets of the same name and addresses, you'll get all of the options that pop up, and we'll show you those options if necessary. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is the number of bedrooms, and this information is generally provided by the assessor's office. The reason I'm looking for this is because sometimes it differs from what is actually present at the property. Your client or the seller, you know, I should be more general. The owner may have added or modified square footage, bedroom, bathrooms without or with permit. Just because the information that's available on property records is, you know, not matching what you're physically seeing at the property, does not mean that it was done without permit. Sometimes the city makes errors, fails to file it. Is this an issue? No. As long as you can verify that the work was done with permit, it shouldn't cause you any issue. If you have cash buyers involved in a transaction, shouldn't be an issue as long as they're willing to pay for that price. The issue comes into advertising square footage when it's not permitted. So I specifically chose this property because you see this, the square footage is listed as 1655 now. However, it was previously listed lower. The city did make an error in this instance, and it was my listing. So what I did was I went to the city website. The additions were made so long ago I was not able to see the permitted addition work, adding the square footage at ladbs.org, so I contacted a permit girl. Yes?
What was the site again?
ladbs.org, Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Although permit stuff can be quite complicated, you may or may not see it clearly. Just because you don't see it there or don't see it clearly written on a permit that you do find at that website does not mean that it's not permitted. It's just what your first place to go where you might easily find that it was.
How did you know even in the first place that the square footage was different from that 1655?
I think it was listed at like 1,300 something. You'll get a feel for spatial stuff after you've been doing this for a while, but my sellers tipped me off right away.
Okay.
And I have previous development experience, but even if you don't, it's very easy to tell. When you walk in and you start seeing, especially wood floors that transition oddly, where the grains are going in different directions, or where you can see seams or additions, you can honestly, you know, common sense tell a lot of times. In this case, it was an enclosed patio that was added with insulation and with permit that added quite a bit of square footage. And it was very easy. You know, you step down and this would normally have been like an awning patio. It's very easy for me to, or the, you know, like as a listing agent, as a buyer's agent, look at these things, right? You want to verify them.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I think you didn't see the last step you took to come here.
Yeah.
And some of
Where do we
We can do it again real quick.
do?
So I'm in the MLS. I go to search, public records, the MLS real tax. You may or may not have this screen. Okay. I do. Oh, I did it this time.
Where did you put the address? Oh.
Here, 2708 Greenfield. And I already have it in here because obviously I've worked with this property. So type that address in and hit search.
Oh.
And it will come up. If there are more than one of the same address in different cities, it will pop up with multiple options with hyperlinks, and you'll select that one. It won't automatically go here. Sometimes you'll have the extra step of being provided a list of multiple entries for that address. Okay? So in this instance, the square footage was listed lower, but now we have it updated properly. Why is that important? Any ideas?
Absolutely. It goes by the internal square footage of the house, generally price per square foot.
Yes, it's going to dramatically affect and skew the price per square foot, which could make the property look much less attractive to a potential buyer. even though it's actually larger and worth more. So you want to make sure this is accurate. How did I rectify this? I did find the permit, but does that mean that I'm going to go ahead and take liability for myself and my brokerage by just updating the square footage? Because whether or not there's a permit, it doesn't necessarily say how much additional square footage should be added, right? What did I do? I hired a floor plan drawing company to come out and tape it, and they actually gave me a sheet, a document that, you know, they took liability for digitally taping it out. And I was able to put it on the MLS. And when you put a listing on the MLS, it asks you where your source of square footage was. So I was able to say outside vendor, or there's something like vendor enhanced. And then there's also a place where you can drop documents into your listings. And you'll see this on occasion if you're browsing the MLS. You'll see a property that has a link for documents. And so I posted that there and I put it in the private comments. But you know, that's a workaround for taking the liability completely off myself. Can I also, if it was not permitted, would I be able to, in private remarks, say that there was more square footage if I had this document? Yes, I could, right? And so you have a better chance of getting a good price for it at that point, but still not that great. The reason being is that appraisers, if they find out about the unpermitted square footage, sometimes will not include it in the square footage assessment of the property, which would give you issues with the property appraising at the value it should for your sale.
If you
Yes.
have it with the permits, do you call the assessor's office for them to rectify the records?
I would not call the assessor's office to have the records rectified with the updated square footage. The reason being is it's a long, lengthy process, and I believe you have to be the owner or the contractor doing the work or adding the square footage. And the second reason why is because all of a sudden it may cause the city to increase your owner's property tax bill, because property tax is calculated on square footage. I don't want to lose my client because they're angry because their property tax bill went up. I don't want them to be reassessed. So I try to stay out of that and work around it if I can. So moving on, I just want you to be aware of that, because those are some of the most common issues you're going to run into when you're pulling information for your CMAs.
So
So,
I don't want to
yes.
really interrupt, but I have a hard time getting to that.
Don't put in the whole address. Just put in 27808 Greenfield. Less is more if you can't find something. Just a note again, if you ever have difficulty pulling up a subject property on the property records, less is more. Take out portions of the address. Put in the numeric portion and the street name only. You're welcome.
I'm having the same issue, but mine just says internal error, even though I keep restarting.
I don't know.
That's, I think, probably, yeah.
With the MLS.
Get out,
Yeah.
get in.
All right. So what am I going to do? Normally I'm going to print this sheet out, but since we don't all have a printer here, I'm going to make a note on my notepad. I almost want to put the dog in my office. I'm going to write down on my notepad my basics. Right here is 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. Oh, sorry. Yes, 2. Thank you. The interior square footage, 1,655. And the square footage of the lot, 6,190. These are the very basic minimums you're going to need for any comparable property you're going to consider for comparative market analysis, okay? There are additional factors you should definitely consider almost every time, but these are your basic minimums. This is how to get a really raw number and quickly. The other thing I like to do at this time, as a side note, and I'll try to stop doing this because I don't want to keep us here too long, is I like to look at the owner name. Why? I want to make sure the person I have a listing appointment with or that I'm writing an offer to is accurate, okay? The other thing I like to do is sort of come down here and I like to look at characteristics. This is not always accurate, okay? But I like to see, especially here, under characteristics, look, tax record said it was 1424. The MLS, because of me, now says 1655. It's been substantiated. Most of the time the MLS prevails now when you go to this format in the MLS for searching property records. But also, oops, sorry. Total bedrooms, tax said 3. I did make sure that it was permitted, and it was permitted for that 4th bedroom. And so I was able to put that in. But I like to see these discrepancies. Why? Because a lot of this information is based upon a previous agent's entry into the MLS. Can you trust what previous agents have done? No. No. Did you guys know half of what I just told you about this permit and square footage and bed bath count stuff? No, right? Maybe some of you. So I want you to look at that. Also, I like to look at total baths, full baths. I like to see if there's a fireplace. Why? Because a lot of times I might be drafting a CMA for a home I haven't seen the interior for, right? How many times do you get a listing appointment and you haven't been in the house yet? For me, it's most of the time. Because if not, it's my previous client and I probably have been in the house and I don't have to have a listing appointment. I'm just sending over comps, which is what we're doing the CMA. So no matter what I do, anytime I'm working with the client, this is the bare basic stuff I bring with me or send to them when I'm discussing their property with them at all. Because what are most clients concerned about? Price, right? Price. I also like to look at the year built. Why? Any ideas?
How new the property is affects the value.
How new it is affects the value, that's one answer. But more specifically, I want to know, is it subject, possibly, to rent control? This is a single family, so in this case, it's not going to be. But if it was a condo that had been converted previously from an apartment complex, that's a possibility. But if it's built after 1978, that's not a possibility at all. Same thing with lead-based paint. Will I need a lead-based paint disclosure? 1978, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I like to look at those things, and also it helps me to determine, like, you know, and you'll get this after you've been in real estate for a while. What can I really expect? What are common issues? What are common characteristics and features of property built around this time? You guys, excuse me 1 minute. I don't like her traveling around. She makes me nervous. I don't want you to do bad potty. Come here. Come here. Thank you. Come here, miss. This is our mascot, Bimo. Wave to everyone on the video. All right. So I also just like to peek at what the last sales price was. Why? Because if a market turns and I see that my sellers bought it at a really high price, I'm going to know right away I might have difficulty getting the number that they want for it. I might have to prepare them for maybe coming out of pocket to close. And of course you want to sell their home, but you need to be an ethical agent, and if it's not in their financial interest, don't waste their time, don't waste yours, right? Yeah. So they need to know. And I was going to invite Pele in here from escrow to discuss this with you, but one of the things you can bring in conjunction is you can go to our escrow officer here and ask her, give her the property address, and ask her whether you're going to be writing an offer or you're going to be going for a listing appointment to help you with some closing cost numbers. She'll pop in like what the owners actually owe on the home and some other info so they can get a general idea. And generally speaking, she's usually going to overestimate a little bit. Why? Because it's always better to give them more money than less. In the buyer's, I think you know what I mean, but it's overestimated to protect you and her. Yes. So I always tell my client, you know, these are estimated and they're probably estimated a little on the high side to be safe. Yeah. All right, so now that we have this information, right, I'm going to close this. But I printed it if I'm not up here doing my presentation. And I'm going to go back to the MLS and I'm going to search. And this is a single family, so I'm going to look at a single family. And you guys are probably going to have a lot of questions about this, but I'm going to try to be sort of general and brief with it, okay? So if I'm going for a listing appointment or I'm going to be preparing a CMA for a buyer that wants to make an offer, any idea which statuses I should use? Possibly. If I'm going for a listing appointment, I definitely want to show active and pendings. Right. I specifically want pendings because if I'm a good listing agent, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to see if those other listing agents would be so kind to share with me a ballpark range. They don't like doing that, particularly if they don't have their contingencies removed. Let me give you a few tips. Be very kind, be very nice, flatter their marketing, flatter their listing, and say, I understand that you still have contingencies, but I'm going for a listing appointment, and I'm looking for a ballpark range so that I can make sure my seller has a competitive listing price and realistic expectations. Most of your fellow real estate professionals are going to be helpful with you, And they're probably going to try to ask you for the address. Don't give them that address, okay? Don't create competition for yourself. But, you know, what I like to close with, and let me tell you, 90% of the time, they give me some sort of number. 90% of the time, if you play it right. And I always tell them, you know, as soon as I have my listing paperwork signed, you'll be the first one to know. And I follow up on it. Why? Because if I have to ask them something like that again in the future, I want them to help me. Okay, so if I'm going for a listing, I'm going to look at active, sold, pending. If I'm going to do a buyer sale, I might do 2 separate CMAs. That which is out there, active and pending, or what is sold. Oh, active under contract also. Sorry, that is pending. Sort of. Does anyone know the difference between active under contract and pending? Besides Brian Chung?
I think you've removed some of the contingencies.
All
right?
contingencies are removed if it's pending. Active under contract means there are still contingencies in place. But active under contract status was not available until maybe like a year and a half ago. It's a newer status, and a lot of agents don't know how to properly use it still. So if you have a client that is looking maybe for backup or really in love with a property and it says pending, I would still pick up the telephone and I would call and say, hey, how's your deal going? Because I have a buyer who's in love with the property. Don't ever rely on another agent's ability. Don't ever cut yourself short on that opportunity, okay? Okay, so back to this. Sold, active, active under contract, pending. You see this date range that pops up. Click on it. I always try to have the most relevant comps. So some areas, especially large condo complexes, are going to have tons of easy comps. Some single families are going to have tons of easy comps. Generally speaking, the more unusual or higher end your property is, the more difficult it's going to be to comp out. Things with specific features like a Malibu property with key access, going to be very difficult to comp out. Horse property, things like that. And there's also some very misleading information. You might have a property you're trying to evaluate that has a lot size of 30,000 square feet for the lot. Only 10,000 of it's flat and usable. So these are external things to keep in mind, but for now we're going to look at just the general stuff. So on this sold date, I like to look at the last 3 months. Why? Well, 3 or 6 months. I like to look at last 3 months because for the most part, where I sell property, there's a lot of sales. We can modify this if we don't find enough. So I pick the last 3 months and then I go down here. It's very important, guys, that you check apply to all selected statuses. Otherwise, it's only going to apply to the sold ones. And we have, remember, active, active under contract, pending, and sold. Okay, so I'm going to hit apply, and you see all these dates pop up here now. If these dates are not here, you did not remember to click that apply to all, and I forget to do it all the time, but it's a good fail-safe. Just check yourself. Here we go. You can come on in. I'm sure you guys all know Pele. Do I say your?
Sorry.
Come on in.
Interrupted. Sorry.
We just discussed it briefly, but we just passed it, so please come on up. Does everyone know Pele? Do I say your name right? Pele. Sorry. Our in-house amazing escort officer.
Thank you.
And come on over so you can also be on the recording.
Okay.
And you'll see yourself here.
Oh, let me set myself up.
I was telling them how I like to check sales or the last sales price when I pull out CMAs because if it's close to the current value, it may be a tight fit. And what do buyers and sellers care about? Pricing. And who can help them with more realistic pricing? You can.
I can. So what I can do for you is I can prepare a seller's estimate or a buyer's estimate that you could take and show your clients. And you could just send me an email and we can put the what you set for your purchase price and all the other standard fees in there and anything else you advise me or let me know you want on there. And I can send that to you to take with you to your appointments. Okay? Thank you.
And a lot of other stuff. Remember I was telling you to check the city and the year built. City building reports and retrofitting requirements. If you need some information to educate buyer seller, she can also help you with that kind of stuff and order that stuff up front, which will help you get your escrow accepted when you have
Exactly.
a listing by the buyer's agent.
Yeah, so if you're ever in doubt, if you're in a city that you don't know if it's not LA County or LA City and you need to know if there's a city report required, or you want to know, if you want to know anything, just call me, give me the property address, call me, send me an email, and I can get you what you need and find out some things that you can let your clients know or provide to your future buyers up front. Okay? Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, also, we were told that you also can find out how much the owners owe on the property, because sometimes the owners could be clueless. You do
We can't
have
find
access?
out how much they owe until they provide us with that information to actually
so we have
order
to
a payoff
rely on the
demand.
owner.
But
Okay.
we can find out the last recorded deed on there and what that amount was.
Oh,
Like, so
Yeah,
I could
so
get a
the
copy
original
of the
amount.
original
Oh.
And
amount.
they'll know, generally speaking, how much they owe on their mortgage. If not, I think title can get you a more specific number.
Yeah.
But in escrow, it's,
Yeah.
they get the exact number
And
from
if
the
you
bank for
ever
you.
want to find out, I can send you over a seller's authorization and I can order it for you.
oh.
Yeah, so if you want to find out anything against the title or something that the seller may have, we will have what's called a statement of information we can send to the title officer, and we can run the seller's social to make sure if they may say they may have a lien or judgments, just to make sure anything pops up against the seller's name or on title, so you can be prepared and aware. And
That's the same thing as preliminary title report, we don't need, you can do it.
so the preliminary title report shows everything that's against the property.
Oh,
But when you do the statement of information specifically for your client, which is the seller, we can actually run their social. Because before you close your escrow, the seller will provide escrow with a statement of information, and we will run that document to make sure that no recent judgments, liens, and mechanic liens have popped up against the seller. Because
Yeah.
sometimes the escrow officers do that at the end, and that will put you in a bind.
Yeah, and remember I said the whole reason you're reaching out is because you want to prepare your buyer or seller for realistic numbers. So are you going to ask for an SI on, a property your buyer said they like? No, you're not. If you're going to go for a listing presentation and your seller says, I think we have some tax issues, there might be a lien, that would be a good time then to reach out and ask for that information, or say, oh, you know what, I can find out exactly, I just need some information, it might take a little while, but if you fill out this, it's called Statement of Information or SI, and give it to Pele, then she can probably, within a few days generally,
A day, that's the maximum. Yeah. If you do it
get
that
you a-
morning, I could get it that day.
get you an amount. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, so
So-
if you ever need anything escrow title related, please come see me. I'll leave some cards up here for you. Okay, you use your in-house escrow, I'll pay your TC fee. All right?
Really?
With the TC. You have to use the in-house TC as well.
And he just raised his fees too.
And it's better to use both of us because although I'm a mutual party, I'm going to watch out for my agents here at this brokerage. I only take deals from the agents here. So of course you'll be my primary concern. Me and Brian work well together. We can look at the contracts. We can foresee any problems beforehand. Okay? Thank you guys for letting me stop in. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to go back now to our basic CMA information. So status, date, and range. We applied our 6-month period. Or no, this is 3 months. 3-month period. So 3 or 6 is good, and we're going to dwindle it down in one direction or another, and it's going to be dependent upon how many examples we find with the criteria we place in. So I'm generally not going to put a list or sold price in here. What I'm going to do is depending on the number of comps, I'll show you the way I like to do it. First, I like to locate my property. And I don't like to use MLS area or city or zip code. Why? Because like Brentwood, north of Sunset, costs way more than Brentwood, south of Sunset. Some areas have a lot of multifamily. Some are estate, single family. So what I like to do is I actually like to use this up here, location and radius search. You can always modify it, but I find it to be the most accurate presentation. And why? Because I also see it on the map, and so I can say, oh, the freeway's right there. That one doesn't apply, or this one is maybe a few blocks away, but it is also in this listing's close proximity to freeway, guys. This one's also close to the freeway, so I am going to use this one, even though it's maybe like 6 blocks down. Okay, so type in the address. And actually, I don't put in too much. Like you saw how I slowed down because it takes a second. I like to just sort of type and give it its time and let it pop up the address because it will pull in addresses from cities elsewhere as well. Okay? And then you're going to see this little box that pops up where you can enter, come here, little dog, where you can enter the miles. I like to start with a really close proximity. So I usually start with 0.2.
Me too.
Yep, that's less than a quarter mile. So I only have 2 listings here. Okay, so I'm going to do it again because I don't like that. I need what's a good number for a general representation?
Mile, half mile.
No, number of example listings I can use.
3.
Oh,
I would say between 5 and 10. Between 5 and 10. There are going to be times that you cannot find 5. There will be times where you can only find 2 or 3. If you have a really relevant comp, I wouldn't be too worried about it. Sometimes there are properties that are just hard to comp as well. Yes.
Will you go back more?
Yes, I would go back in more time.
If it was, yeah.
So,
Rather than like the square footage or anything.
yes. And I'm actually, I've decided this Exposition Boulevard, and you'll know this, you guys should probably drive by property that you're going to write on or potentially list. I happen to know that the Expo, or the Expo line, the Metro line's here. But there is a nice little pocket of like trees and quiet area. So you could even see how this is a radius and the freeway's here. I don't like that. I want property that is on this side of the freeway, like my subject property. So I've decided I don't really like this one. So you can go over here. Here's another option. I'm going to draw. I'm going to draw a polygon between, there we go. I'm going to draw a polygon between the borders that I think are geographically relative to making my comp relevant. Yeah, this tool is a little wonky,
Okay.
but it's so useful that it's worth dealing with its little wonkiness. Okay? So I still only have 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back up here.
6 months.
Yeah, and now I'm going to select 6 months. Remember, click this box, apply to all selected statuses, and I'm going to click apply. Yay, I have 6! I'm going to now view my listings because if I only have 6 in that pocket, even though I haven't put in the important things like square footage, bedroom and bathroom count, there's another way to look at it, is price per square foot, condition of property, right? So the very first thing I like to do is I like to look at the pricing. You can generally see over on the left-hand column also photos. So my subject property I happen to know was somewhat remodeled and updated maybe like 10 years ago, but it's definitely not new construction. So what can I do? I can definitely pull out anything that's 100% remodeled or new construction. Like this one. Okay, yeah. The second thing I'm going to look at is my square footage. Do I have anything that is dramatically larger? Yes, I do, right? So like number 1 is dramatically larger, right?
Number 7.
Yeah. Number 7, number 6, number 5, dramatically larger. For solds, I also like to look at the sales price. Oh, okay. So I'm going to help you out a little bit here. One of the things that you don't always have on a one-line report is the sales price per square foot. You can find that by changing the status to agent detail full or by here. One line report. This will be very helpful for you. I'm going to show you how to set up a little template for your preferences on how to view one lines. Okay? I'm not going to select a report right here. I'm going to create a new. And you see all of this information on both sides? So This is all of the possible information you can have popped into your one-line reports, and this is what is included in the standard one-line report. You can drag and drop, you can reorder, I can put them in any order I want. It's very helpful. But right now, what I'm going to do is I want to see the sales price per square foot. So that's sold price, per square foot. And I'm gonna either drag it over to the right-hand side or hit add. And then I'm going to give it a name. And you will find that you will have 20, if you really utilize this tool, it will be very time saving for you. And you might have 20 customized ones, depending upon the area. You'll figure it out as you play with your search.
Kristen, what did you add? Sold price per lot size? Or
Sold price per square foot.
list price per square?
Sold price per
Sold per square foot. And this is not going to apply to all of my examples because I think one of my examples is active, although I'm going to remove that shortly. So once you put in any name you want here, do you guys need more time? Do you need me to go through it again?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to do it way over from the beginning. So once I have my subject property, and I'm realizing I don't have that many comps with similar square footage to my subject property, which is 1655. I want to see what my sales price per square foot is, because that's a way to sort of calculate those larger properties, which may be in similar condition, in relation to the value of my subject property using my subject property square footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the right-hand side. I'm going to click the settings button, one-line report. I'm not going to select anything. What I'm going to say is create new. The right-hand side is all of the criteria that's already included in your one-line report. On the left-hand side is all of the possible information you could include in your one-line report. I specifically want sold price per square foot. I don't always remember that. Sometimes I write in sales price per square foot. The nice thing is with the search bar, you can type in anything you want, find it, but it's also in alphabetical order. Okay? So sold price per square foot, and you can either drag it on over. It didn't work in that case, I don't know why. Or you can hit add. So I just added that. And I can also, if I want, change where this information is going to show up on my one line. The way it is currently positioned at the very bottom means it will show up at the very right-hand end of my one-line report, which means it's going to be hard for me to see. And that's very important information for me, in my opinion, while I'm drafting this or trying to pull comps for my CMA. So I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to put it, I'm just going to move it up to the top. You can click up or you can drag it. So you see I'm clicking up, or you can just drag it. But I can only drag it as, high as the top.
We can add 2 criteria.
No, you can add a lot of criteria. You can remove a lot of criteria. I like to remove a lot of criteria. If I'm pulling comps, I know what city it's in. I know what area it's in, right? Let's see. I like to drag it and drop it. What? I like to put it right by my sold price. Why? It gives me a little perspective right away. So, you're going to put in a report name.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to hit save and load. Automatically, do you see my sales price per square foot added? Yes, my new column's there, so it's easy for me to see. Now, not every CMA you do are you going to need to know this, but very commonly you will. This is probably the most common problem I run into is that I cannot find comps that have similar square footage to my subject property. So I want you to see this one. You will run into a lot of advanced stuff, but this is the basic one. I hope that you have so many beautiful examples of comps that you never need to modify any of this like we just did, but you very well may need to do so. All right, so I decided I don't like this new remodel here because it's not very representative of my property. Will you always know this? No, because you may not have been in the property. I like to ask my clients questions tactfully about their home and ask them to send me a photo or two. I also like to bring general comps, and then once I see the property, send them a new CMA. with better numbers because now I've seen it. Okay? So one of the ways to get rid of the things I don't think are relative is to select all up here, this right column, and then go through and just unselect the ones you don't want. So I can very clearly tell this is a remodeled home just from the thumbnail. And I don't like that square footage. I think this one is remodel also. When in doubt, look at pictures. Pictures should be viewed for each of your comps in your CMA, if you at all have the time. Hopefully you are going out on Caravan and you're taking a look at these properties personally, and then you'll know right as soon as you see the address and the photos. And that's one of the big pluses of going out on Caravan in an area. In fact, this listing I put on the market sooner, and I think I got it because I started talking to the sellers, and these properties came on the market that weren't as good. And I called them up and I was like, oh my gosh, I think we should list now. I think we can get a better price. Why? Because these really ugly houses came on the market that make yours look so amazing. Do you want to go to the open houses with me on Sunday? Do you want to go to the brokerage open with me on Tuesday? And that's how I got the listing. Well, that's how I got the listing on the market sooner. I already knew the sellers, but. Excuse me, guys. Anyone know what Yeah.
Was this your water?
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. All right, so I don't particularly like this comp either, but considering I have such a unique property that is between the expo line and the freeway, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in. Why? My sellers can see what a remodeled home is worth, or my buyers can see what they can get as far as a remodeled home with slightly higher square footage. Oh, I did good, man. I sold this one, and the buyer side commission was credited, so it would have been like 132. It's smaller, and it's definitely not as nice as this one, although this one is Military Avenue. So drive your neighborhoods too. Some streets are busier than others. Busy street, what does that do to value? Decreases value. Yeah, why? People are worried about their children and their animals. Noise. Pollution. Although this was so close to the freeway, my only saving grace was that it was the cul-de-sac and had a great yard. And my sellers were super clean and had really cute furniture and stuff. All right, so I'm not going to use this first comp. I'll show you the photos and show you why. I just think that it's too big, it's modern, and everything has been remodeled and new. I just don't think it's a very good representation of my subject property. And I do think my subject property, our Greenfield property, is unique enough to where with a smaller number of comps, it's representative. So I unselected this one. Definitely a 1.7 home is not going to apply. I happen to know this home. It has an ADU. Do you guys know what an ADU is?
Accessory dwelling.
Yes, accessory dwelling unit, meaning they have a garage has been converted to a separate home that they can rent, which would dramatically increase the value. Also, this home was completely remodeled. It was a flip, yes.
Maybe not related. Is the price per square foot of ADU is the same as the properties or is it calculated?
It's calculated differently. It can get very complicated. You should give a general ballpark. And if I were you were trying to comp something out with an ADU, look at property with other ADUs, even if you have to go further outside of the area. And if you have to get more specific, you're going to base your CMAs and values on also potential rental value. A commercial agent would be able to break it down real quick for you. It's very, it's much outside of what we're doing today, but it is a great question, and that will set you apart and make you a much better agent and give you much better information to present to your client.
So can we just in general say that the price per square foot of, like, let's say 3,000 square foot house and another one that is 2,200 plus 800 ADU, the first house is more expensive?
I don't know. It depends upon the potential of the rental value in income, right? That property with the ADU might be worth more because they can rent out that ADU unit for what? Maybe $4,000 a month. What does that do to value? What does that do to their loan? What does that do for them tax-wise? I would not use a home without an ADU to comp out a home with one if I could at all.
Yeah.
There will be times that you'll have a difficult time. Come see someone like me. Talk to a commercial agent in our office. Don't tell him I said this, but Austin Chen does a lot of residential income, and he's super nice and super amazing. And when I have a question like that, that's who I go to. Sorry, Austin. All right, so now that I've unselected the listings and sales that I just think don't apply, I am going to go to, give me a second here. Right here, Cloud CMA.
Oh, so you picked.
So did you
So
pick the
you
mandatory?
didn't get any final result from that one, huh?
Till then.
No, you won't get final results from that one, but it's gonna,
Military.
these properties are now gonna pull in to our CMA, and we can modify it after we pull them in.
Right.
And it doesn't, if you guys have more or different properties, that's okay. I want you to understand the functionality of it and some of the basic things that affect value. Oh, as a side note, any idea some of the things that can dramatically affect value that are very difficult to find from the MLS? Views, guys.
Oh, yeah.
So many agents will say a property is a view home, and it really has a view of a house next door and treetop. That is not a view home. This is why the longer you're in the industry, the better you know the neighborhoods and the homes, the better you're going to be at pulling these CMAs. They're going to be difficult for you at first, and you'll get better and better at them, but then you're going to have difficult ones sometimes. You cannot rely on qualitative information that other agents pop into the MLS. You cannot do it. They don't understand. They are being directly dishonest. They are just not skilled. They made an error. Their assistant put it in for them and had no idea. You cannot rely on that. So I want you to know that there are a few things that just absolutely affect value. Usable amounts of the total square footage of the land, which are difficult to tell unless you've seen the property. So, when you're pulling the CMA, you can ask the seller about the property. They'll generally have a pretty decent idea. If you pull up property records and you see 40,000 square feet, one of my questions is it all flat?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get to know the areas, like I do a lot of sales in Kenter Canyon and Brentwood. On the east side of Kenter Canyon, most of the backyards of the properties go uphill. On the west side, almost all of them are nice and flat. There's a huge price difference, and my sellers oftentimes, I don't know why, but I get them on the east side most of the time. Yay me. They're like, well, why isn't my property worth $1 million more like my neighbor directly across the street? It's about the same, and they're right, it is. Because the land's not flat, it's not usable land. Yes.
Quick question. So if the house was like, I know obviously it makes a dramatic difference if the house is across the street from a school or something like that, opposed to like the other end of the corner of the street. So how much
Maybe.
percentage-wise, if it's really loud across the street from a school, you should
It could be attractive to some people, unattractive to some people. Specifically, the example I'm giving you, Kenter Canyon, there's Kenter Elementary right there. And I think that, there's some traffic, but people don't care. They're buying there for those schools most of the time. They're happy. They want to send their little kids to walk down the street and go there. What I would say is a relative factor is Kenter Canyon goes way up. Mandeville Canyon goes way up, right? And there's not always a whole lot of different alternative access. That can affect property value significantly. So if you're all the way up at the top of Bundy or Kenter or Mandeville, these are all canyons in Brentwood, but we have them here too. Beverly Glen, Coldwater, Benedict, all of these streets, Laurel. The higher up they are, the harder they are to get to, the longer it takes to get to shopping, restaurants, other people, schools, services, the less the property is going to be worth, okay? So these are things that you need to look at a map for. Drive by that property. I don't care if it's at 2 a.m. You want the listing? Go get it, girls and boys. Go get it. Be better than somebody else. Drive by and see where it's at. Don't get out of your car and scare the people inside where you have your listing appointment, okay? I had a coworker years ago that was stalking the property to get info before her listing appointment, and I don't think she got that listing because the sellers came out of the house, their lights turned on. She was just standing in front of the house, but those canyon homes, they don't have a whole lot of sidewalk traffic, right? Okay. So those are some things I want you to think of and think about. Just be very careful when you're working with qualitative parameters. Don't trust anything, look at the photos, drive by, make a phone call to the listing agent or the buyer's agent, whoever you can get a hold of, okay? All right, so now that we're here at Cloud CMA, we're gonna say create a CMA. I've never played with any of these other options, but let me tell you, I know some pretty fancy stuff with our MLS because I used to work for a lot of people who'd ask me for ridiculous things, and I had to learn them pretty quick. I would highly suggest anything on the MLS you ever see, clicking on it when you have free time, when you're stuck on the phone.
Cool.
Yes, you might find something that is extra special that makes you special. Super cool, yeah. So we're gonna click the not super cool option, but the most functional, create CMA. So like I said, a lot of you are gonna have some stuff that looks a little bit different because there's ways to modify it. We're not gonna go into how to personally on the back end, like for your account, customize that now. You can call Cloud CMA, they have great customer service, just like the MLS does. I even think the MLS will help you with Cloud CMA. So you have some options there. For now, remember I printed out that property records and I'm talking to someone, so I probably know the name of the client. But if I'm representing the buyer and I'm pulling comps, I may not be as formal as to give them a CMA, although if you're not familiar with pulling comps, I would go ahead and use the CMA and just pull the pages you want. So I'm putting in my buyer who's making an offer or that I'm sending comps to, or I'm putting in my seller's name, right? So, and they will see this, it pulls into a title page. So if you're not planning on using the title page, no big deal. But if you are, you don't want to look sloppy. You want to have proper punctuation and stuff in here, right? You have a section for private notes. So you can say Mr. and Mrs. Jones down here if you don't plan on using your title page. All right, I always put in the address. It will, if you do it slowly, it will pull up for you.
Kansas.
I know, right? You don't want Kansas. All right, remember, I'm going to double check this information, even though it automatically pulled in for me. Remember, it was 1655. The beds was 4. That's right. If I have a photo, I might pop it in here, but I might not. I might not want to scare that seller and show them that I'm a stalker, right? If they didn't invite me, I might not want to show them that I have photos of their home. You will have some people tell you opposite, that it's good to have that photo. I would think you're a little weird myself. Know your audience. Know your, like if you don't know them, probably err on side of being conservative with that.
What about just snipping it from like the Google page?
Yeah, Google Maps, I like to show like the location at least, or Google Street View. You can do that definitely. Previous listing, obviously this home has been sold recently as last week. So you can pull the MLS photo. All right, so there's some advanced info here. We're not going to go into that, but I highly recommend you play with this stuff when you get a chance. Okay, guys? All right. Do you see these numbers here?
Yes.
These are the selected properties we chose to include in our CMA report. They automatically pull in. You have this quick and dirty option. I do not ever recommend using it. We don't live in Kansas, and we don't have many large builder tract properties where they're all cookie cutter and have the same parameters. Even with condos, interiors are different, so I don't like using quick and dirty. Yes?
Oh, I was gonna say, can't you click through the photos?
The photos will come up later. Yeah. So the next step is to hit fetch listings, and this is going to take a moment. Yes.
Her CMA was pulling on a totally different square footage.
Yes, we modified the square footage. Remember, it pulls it in from property records, and that's why we pulled property records first, and that's why we ask our seller about their home before we play with this. Or the listing agent if we're repping the buyer and pulling comps. All right, so is everyone here? We good to move on? Okay. All right. So the format of this changed since the last time we did a CMA. Yay, we'll be learning together now. And I think it's just the visual stuff. But it gives you some summaries, and I like to just look at these numbers for me. I don't know if these come up based on the new formatting I'm seeing here, but this looks about right to me based on my knowledge of the market. And if you look at the comps you're using in this clearly, you'll know if these numbers look skewed to you at all. If they're wildly skewed, you may have accidentally included or excluded property you meant to do the opposite way. So you could close out of this and go back to your search criteria
Edit it.
and edit it,
Yeah.
right? Well, no, you can't add in property you didn't pull in.
Right, but from the
Yeah.
existing.
You can get rid of all
Yeah, so you can close this and you can, this is just a second check, double check yourself very easily. So you can sort the properties. I like to sort them by, in this instance, I like the square footage. Why? Because I don't have a whole lot of property with the same square footage as mine, and I'm going to make that a speaking point because when I talk to my clients, I'm going to actually break out the simple math that will assess the estimated general value of their home using square footage or price per square foot that we added in, okay? So I'm going to say customize report. Oh, no, they did. You're right. Hold on. Before we switch screens, there were options that said include all, exclude all. Those are new. So maybe there is a way to pull in listings that you may have accidentally excluded. All right, so yeah, okay, good. This still works the same. Like I said, this is a completely different interface, the visual, but you can actually drop and drag all of these things. Mine is customized, so yours may look a little different. And I like to, you can actually click on these and see what they look like. And this is the auto-drafted content of the Cloud CMA report, right? So it's going to pull the information of the subject properties that I chose to use. And it's going to show me those properties on a map.
Sorry, did you already say publish?
Yes.
Oh.
No, I did not. I did not say publish. I said customize.
Oh, customize.
And-
Oh, customize.
yeah.
Okay. Ooh,
Okay?
where's customize?
On the
Bottom.
bottom.
It'll look like this.
Customize, but then when you have this,
Then you're on the same page as me.
oh, okay.
Mine just looks a little different.
Oh, maybe that's what
The
it
reason
is.
it looks a little different is
Right,
I
because
have
you-
modified my Cloud
Yes,
CMA
okay,
report.
I got it.
And remember, I told you we're not going to modify them today. I highly recommend that you go ahead and play with it.
Mhm.
I just want you to see some of the basic functionalities. So most of you that haven't used your the Cloud CMA, you're probably going to have a lot more stuff here than me. I pulled out a lot of stuff because I like to have a listing presentation that I pop the numbers into separately. And so you don't know what any of these things look like. So you can go to them and click on them and preview them and decide if you want to use them or not. Also, the things that you haven't added, you can, I think, drag over. I'm not sure. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Plus and minus. So these are all the things that I've taken out of the standard Cloud CMA package. But if I wanted to add any of them in, I could. There was a question?
Yeah, so what did you keep and what did you get rid of?
Yeah.
Oh man, I change it actually.
Too many,
I change it for almost every CMA I do.
Okay.
That's why I highly recommend you play with them. But for me, what do I want to see? I want to see, this is probably my basic format.
Okay, yeah.
Map of all listings. I want to see where the listings
Right.
are in relation to my subject property that I'm
Right.
pulling the comps for. And I shouldn't say listings, sales, comps. If you ever don't understand terminology I'm using, please let me know. I've been around this business for a long time also, and terminology does evolve over time. You'll find that there are many general terms that an agent is using when they're trying to talk about something specific, and terms that mean different things, but the same word is used for. Just like our fun English language.
I was gonna say, I one time tried to do this. I think it's a great idea to check it because it could come up to like maybe 80 pages.
Yeah, it's
You want to make sure that it's concise and to the point.
Yeah.
I learned, you don't want it to be 80 pages. They'll be
Right.
bored, they'll lose interest. You want it probably like 15?
I don't know. I have some clients who
Right.
I might bring more for because they
Customized
may
for the
say, they may tell me right away they think their home is worth a lot more than I think it's going to be. And so I really want photos of my comps, especially in the price range that they think their home should be,
Exactly.
because I want them to see all of the differences in the photos. So I'd say it's a case by case. And a lot of times there are summary pages you can use, but you can leave the CMA with them because they may not initially agree with you, but if you leave that 80-page photo packet, they may at night talk between themselves and look at it. They may come around. Do I present all of it? No. But I do, if I'm having
Wanna
difficulty
keep
with
their
value,
interest up.
leave it there. So maybe they'll look at it when I'm not there and decide that they agree with me. I hope. All right, so I like the map of all listings. And this is so I can make sure that I'm not making a mistake. I'm not using a comp that isn't relative to geographic borders of my subject property. And I can also show that to my sellers that I know the area that they live in, even when I don't. Summary of comparable properties. This will give you general stats. Remember I talked to you about the stuff that's really important. Beds, baths, year built, square footage, lot size, price, sold date. Okay? So you can always look at all of these, and you see all of this stuff down here? Look, I haven't updated. I was at Pacific Union, well, I was PT, which became Pacific Union, which became Compass. I thought I did, but maybe it didn't save. In any case, I was talking about customizing it. Make sure you look at all your pages all the way down to the very bottom and make sure it's all accurate, okay? If you want to, you can download singular pages of your CMA. So instead of going through all of this, if you're like, I only want this, you can download this. You can print this one page instead of the CMA package, all right? Okay. So listings, we went through the summary. Here's the details. And so it's going to go through a lot of the stuff we saw in property records. Do you remember I was talking about how I hired a company to come in and actually tape out square footage? Yes. And so when I listed the listing, I had to say it was vendor enhanced. No, this is not me. And in any case, this is a status you should be using if you're hiring a company to come in and give you square footage. All right? So it's going to give you sold date, basic stuff. It will give a little description. Why? You may not be able to tell easily or quickly, and your buyers and sellers who aren't very skilled may not be able to see quickly that, oh wow, there is an ADU unit, or there's a pool. How is this different from the property we're looking at, or how is it similar? Right? You might have a property you're pulling comps for a buyer on that has a gigantic, beautiful pool and yard. But every other comp in the area has a big, beautiful yard and no pool. This may be very important to your buyer, but in realistic value terms, does it make that much of a difference in purchase or sales price? Somewhat. Generally speaking, you would estimate what, Ashley, 50 to 100 grand? 50 to 100 grand difference. And this is depending upon like usually the newness and how nice the pool area is. The newer and more fancy it is, you know, closer to the $100,000 range, I'd say 50 for, you know, like standard pool. When you get into hillside property, that is not the case. So I sold a Kendrick Canyon listing on that east side of the street that I told you is all uphill. Mine was the only one I think in 2 or 3 blocks that had a pool. And that was because they'd owned the property for 33 years and they'd actually dug with their parents. They dug the pool themselves and done the permit and everything when, you know, it wasn't such a complicated process. We thankfully had soils and engineering to prove that there were retaining walls, there was no movement, there was no problems with it. But that was something that made my listing super special in Kendrick Canyon, is because those east side streets and those price ranges do not have pools. So if I had a buyer who really wants a pool but is in the price range of that east side of Kendrick Canyon, that is something that makes it very unique. So what did I do? I made sure as a listing agent I took photos of that pool, and that was part of my marketing. That was a featured part of my marketing. All right? Yeah, the remark section is very important. You definitely want to read this before you present it to your client. You may want to make a little cheat sheet. You may want to highlight to visually help yourself and your client look at things like, oh, it's updated. or it's got a 2-car garage. You know, things that you think are relative to your comp. I don't know why. There we go. Okay. So yeah, for the listings you've selected to be part of your CMA, this is where you can look at the photos if you want to. And this is where you get an idea maybe of how long or short your CMA would be. I don't know why it's doing this. It's only showing me one page for one listing. Well, that's not a problem.
It'll show all of them.
At the end, when I hit publish, yeah. So usually you could go in here and you could see the entire section of the report, but since they've revamped it, you only get a sample of the first page, I think. But that's not an issue. We'll just review it at the end. That's usually when I find stuff anyways, when I think I'm done. All right, adjustments. I don't quite remember what that is, so I'm gonna go in here, look at it. It's a blank page. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take that out. Comparable property statistics. I do like this. There are some people, buyers, sellers, who are visual people. So I like these bar graphs to show them, you know, the subject property versus the other properties as far as the sales price. And then it again goes over that recap of the sold listings. And this gets broken out into, I think, sold listings, active listings, pending listings. If you have subject property you've included that has multiple statuses. In our case, I only have sold properties because the one active property that came up in our search results, I removed because I didn't think it was relevant. I thought it was modern and too updated. But you'll see a much different page here if you have many types of statuses included in your subject comps. All right, so if I like everything here and I have decided I don't want to add anything else and I don't want to take anything else out, I hit publish report. This takes a few moments. So if you have any questions, oh, never mind. It no longer takes a few moments. Oh, it does. It does. Here we go. It's publishing. And if anyone has any questions in the meantime, I'm happy to answer. Yay? Yeah.
It's something I have a problem sometimes, like when you do comps for a building, you know, a lot of the agents state the building itself to do the most relevant comps, and other people use the area.
Are you talking about a condo?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, if you have enough relative comps in a condo complex, then I would stay within the same building. Why? It has all of the common features are going to be the same.
Yes.
And you're going to be able to probably comp out very similar square footages and be able to visually show easily the differences between value of updated and less updated individual units within that building. But a lot of times there are not enough. So you might want to look at neighboring buildings, but you'll want to also make sure that you're not looking at a full service building versus a bare bones, like it's only got, it has no pool, it has no anything, versus valet and pool and sauna and gym and all of that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
How do you value the, like for example, if it's a condo,
Mm-hmm.
there is one in front with a view, like you're in the street, or there is one on the back view of the other building. How do you value these two?
I'm going to look for comps in that building, even if I have to go years back. And I'm going to look at the differences in values between the view units and the non-view. And then let's talk about the Wilshire corridor for a second. Once you get into those super high rises, the higher up it is, huge price difference. Why? Panoramic view versus street view, street noise. So, you know, you can definitely look at neighboring buildings for that. But generally speaking, if you have a building that has that sort of diversity in views, it's going to be a large building and you'll hopefully have a lot of subject comps available in that same building.
What about laundry, washer and dryer in the unit?
And I mean, would it be a factor in determining whether someone wants to buy it? Yes. Would it be a huge determining factor in its value? I wouldn't say so. I mean, it could affect the value a little bit, but you know, there are some buildings that allow washer and dryer to be put in an individual unit and some that are not. That would come into play also. Are there communal laundry rooms? Is there one on every floor versus one in the building? I think that that's more of an arbitrary. I'm going to look at the main stuff, right? Because I'm not going to provide an exact number, generally speaking, to my client anyhow. I'm going to give them a price range. Why? Sometimes I haven't seen the property. Why? Because even though I've looked at all my property and done all my research, I may not have seen all the comps. And why? Because there could just be something weird, a color that most people don't like on the walls that makes it sit longer. It could be a weird time of year. It could be something that really visually appeals to a lot of people and is going to sell for way more. It could be the only one available in the entire building that people want to live in, and someone's willing to pay a lot more for it. Yes?
What's an approximate percentage price range that you want to give?
I want to stay within 10% of the total value. I'll explain that better. I don't think that's very clear.
What was the question again?
The price range I'd use. Obviously, the more expensive the home is, the more range there's going to be. So I like to think about it this way. A general rule of thumb is if you don't sell a listing or it sits on the market a long time, your first price reduction should be in the range of about 10%. Why? Because buyers would probably make offers within 10% of its list price if they were willing to pay that. So I sort of like to keep it within a 10% range. So let's say I think on the high end it's worth about $2 million. I'm probably going to say it's worth about 1.850 to 2, something like that. It's going to be relative. Now, if it's a $500,000 value is the median, I'm probably going to be looking at a price range of $490 to $510. It's going to be relative. And I also use the information I have in my comps to help me decide how large that range should be. Because there are going to be times that the comps just won't make sense. They just won't. Sometimes there's reasons for this. If you see a huge discrepancy, pick up that phone and call the listing agent or the buyer's agent of that sold property and say, hey, I noticed that this property sold for far more than anything else in the area that's similar or far less. Was there anything special about it? Appraisers do this when they do appraisals. And so if you sell property, they will call you after you sell property, sometimes years later, because they want to use your listing or sale as a comp. Sometimes it'll be in private remarks. I highly encourage you to read all private remarks on any MLS listing you ever pull for any reason. Why? Your client might, and if you don't know, you might look stupid. Yes?
And then on navigating let's say on the buy side, how, when the client asks, how much do you think we should offer?
Well, that has a lot of factors.
Yeah.
Are there other offers?
Yeah.
How long's it been on the market?
Yeah.
What do the comps say?
And do you give
What's your budget?
Do you give a range as well, or?
Yeah, I definitely give a range. Now, more specifically, I might suggest that they start with an offer at a certain number if they don't have much competition. And this is also going to be based upon my assessment of my audience being the listing agent and seller, the way it's positioned. My clients, whether or not I think that my clients emotionally and mentally need to have a counter process in order to come to that ultimate acceptance price, or whether or not my clients are just very serious and offering their best number right up front. And I'm going to make sure that I convey that information to the other side as well. And unfortunately, you're going to run into this a lot. Everyone likes something more expensive than they can afford, right? Sometimes I go in and I'm like, I know it's not necessarily the price you want to see to the listing agent. This is who I'm saying this to. But my client's max that they qualify for is this number, and that's what we're giving you. We're offering you everything that they qualify for. Communicate these things, right? It may or may not help you, but these things need to be communicated. So yeah, that's a tough question, but there are a lot of factors, and I think those are the main ones. All right, so now I'm going to go back to our CMA. I'm going to say view PDF. This also takes some time, so if there are any more questions, let me know. Or maybe not, because we only have 4 comps. Yay. And we only have 16 pages in this entire...
What happened to it in the case where a property hasn't been sold within a mile of it, like in the canyon? I once had a property in the Nicholas Canyon on the Hollywood Hills, and the guy wanted
I don't know, I'd have to look at the specific property. We can talk about it after class if you like.
But there was not many sold in that area. It was hard to come up with a price.
Yes, you're going to run into some hard stuff sometimes, and that would be like a more advanced CMA class. which I probably won't be teaching here because I have enough of like the core fundamental classes. But what you're going to find is that you're going to make friends with people in this office. And some of your friends in this office are going to have better, more strength in one area than another. Some of them are going to be good at some things, bad at some things. I highly suggest talking to people, being nice to people, asking them. Most people like to feel appreciated and helpful. If I'm available and you ask me, I'll do my best to help you. I'm not always available. Ask your mentor. Ashley's a great mentor.
You can also just call the MLS and we'll walk you through anything.
Oh yeah, they may not know the areas or something though, but they'll walk you through the technical end of it. Yeah, as far as the more sensitive stuff, like comping out something that's difficult to comp out, look on the MLS and see who sold the most property in that area. Maybe call up that agent, especially if they're within your same company. Okay, so we're going to look at the CMA report now. And this is going to be in exactly the same order and have all the same pages we saw, except now we're going to see all of the pages, unlike the preview we saw prior to publishing the Cloud CMA. So here's my map of my listings. I always double check. Shows my subject property. I double check that address. I look at my 4 comps. For the most part, guys, your CMAs better have more than 4 comps. Just because of the pocket our subject property is in, with the expo line and the freeway and other major streets, that's not going to be the case because those comps outside aren't going to be so relative. Double check this info. It's clearly not right for me on here, right? I'm no longer at Pacific Union, or if I am, I'm a double agent. I am no longer on Rodeo Drive, and I'm glad because I'd be broke. Summary of comparable properties. I like to look here also. And this is where I double check myself for errors, or I might rethink my strategy. See, we have our 5-bedroom here with large square footage, the small lot size. I am going to put it in here because I want my clients to see the diversity. But again, I'm reading my audience. I hope you have many more comps than this that are super relative and exactly like the specs you have on your subject property, but that won't always be the case. So my clients were super savvy sellers. They bought and sold a few times. So I felt more comfortable adding in sales that weren't as, comps that weren't as relative to show them the difference. This can backfire on you, however. You could have a listing appointment where you bring comps that show remodel and new construction, and for whatever reason, your seller is unable to identify the difference between their all original, completely unupdated property and the remodel or new construction. So do not come yelling at me if your client, for some reason, thinks their property is worth new construction if you include it. I'm telling you right now that not everyone's always logical. They're very emotionally attached to their home. So use your best judgment in including or excluding stuff.
And here they may say that our lot is much larger than this first lot, so why are we going?
Well, that's why I have these other ones for very similar lot sizes. All right, but I always double check myself, and this is where I just rethink my strategy. This is always my fail-safe. Always my fail-safe. Is when I look here. How could this backfire? Why could this backfire? Will this backfire with my client? Do I know my client well enough to be diverse and show other stuff? I did in this case feel comfortable, so I did. Property details. So we'll go over all of the details. Like I said, we just discussed this, the basic descriptions and remarks of the property. It will not show private remarks. So private remarks usually says all the bad stuff, right? So make sure that you make notes or somehow include private remarks. Make a note for yourself. I like to actually write on my CMA report. It may not look super clean, but I want to show my value and my knowledge to my clients. I'm going to write on there, like note. I put a little asterisk, home required $85,000 in mold remediation repair work. Whatever important note it is that skews its value, because I'm representing it, and if I don't have all of the factors that really dramatically affect the value, I'm not representing it properly. And I'm hurting myself, I'm hurting my client. I'm not doing my job well, and I'm less likely to end up with a paycheck if I'm not doing my job well. All right, it's going to go through listing photos. Very helpful. go through it. So it goes through on each of your subject properties, and we have 4 here, so I'm going to scroll through those. It goes through our subject property. And then it goes, through to comparable property statistics analysis, or whatever other pages you've decided to include or exclude in yours. All right? And then you can download it and email it, or you can print it, or you can do both. I like to at least have it in my email. I don't necessarily want to send it ahead to my clients. Why? Because I don't want them to have access to this report that doesn't include maybe those things like I talked about that might skew the value, like that mold remediation work that was done. I don't want them to decide they don't want to have a listing appointment with me because they think the information I'm representing to them is inaccurate, or because I'm devaluing their home for some reason, or I'm overvaluing it. So I don't like to send this information ahead to my sellers. But I do like to email it to myself. That way, at the closing of my appointment, if they want an electronic format, I can go ahead and email that to them, or I can do it later. It's just one more touch to like sort of follow up, a sneaky little trick to, oh, so I just wanted to check in with you. It was so great to meet with you today or yesterday and go over all of the information. Did you have any more questions? Would you like to go see some of these properties if you have active properties? You know, I like to look and see if they're open this weekend. Did you want to go and personally see some of the properties that are included in the CMA? It's just another excuse to reach out and touch your client and get a pulse on how they're feeling if you didn't get the listing paperwork or the buyer's offer drafted at the time you presented this initial information.
Sorry, do you include the commission distribution?
No. But like I said, this is all stuff that you will do at your own discretion, so I highly recommend looking at all of it. The tools can be helpful, not helpful sometimes. So I like to also print multiple copies. I don't print one copy of my CMA. Why? Because you're generally sitting with 2 or more people. A lot of times you are not sitting right next to them because you want to be making eye contact with them. You want it to be a personal thing, right? We're talking about the technical end, but your presentation appointments, if they're in person, they're very personal. A sale and a buy for your clients most of the time is a very emotional thing. So print out multiple copies so you cannot lose a valuable part of your technical side of your meeting and your emotional side of your meeting. Okay? So I think that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions in relation to this specific document?
Before I did that, I crossed CMA, they showed the name of the restaurant, the schools, restaurant. Is that, did they change it?
You can add that.
Sure.
That may be something. I know it's available in the MLS.
No, it used to be on the Class CMA, I remember that.
It may be there.
It may be there.
I don't like using that. There are some areas, especially for me, it's very important being in, like, specializing in the Brentwood area. There are some areas that have a little overlap. It's called area of choice. And I like to be very careful about, Culver City is like this too. A lot of Culver City is actually City of LA schools. I like to be very careful and actually go to the district websites direct because they can modify those boundary lines if I'm going to include those at all. Most of the time I'm not, because that's a lot of liability. I'm not going to put it in writing. I usually put it in my notes, and I ask my sellers. And if it doesn't line up to my research, I ask them about it, or I double check with the district. If it's for a buyer, you know, I might just pull up the district info and send it direct, or send a link to the district info so my buyers can double check.
Is that the grade school?
There's great schools, and that will give you nearby schools. It doesn't actually always tell you the school that is directly linked to that address. And the criteria that's in greatschools.org, it can be arbitrary, right? I like to give that out. Most people who are looking for schools, they are already super familiar with these websites and the type of, the type of rating and reputation that school has. Like I said, the times that I call the district and check, and what I do provide is like Culver City, especially Kendrick Canyon, but I like to go directly to the district website. That's the most up-to-date stuff. And that would be like lacitischools.org or something. If you Google search it, it will be there. Culver City, like if you ever type in the legal city name and school district, you're most likely going to be able to navigate around and find a direct link to either being able to pop an address in, like you can with the City of LA website, or Culver City actually has this really antiquated, old school printout of addresses. And you have to go by street name, and then you have to look at the numeric portion. It will have ranges. So every school district's different. Be very careful because these are things that can backfire on you.
Some people say I want to go to that specific school area. They say I had a client who wanted to go in the.
It's an MLS search criteria where you can actually pop in the school area you want. I highly recommend you guys go to the MLS Advanced, the Vesta Plus MLS Advanced Users class. They will spend a lot of time in detail with you on this. I haven't done it, but I really want to do it. If anyone signs up for it, please let me know. I'd like to do it too.
We used to have MLS classes every month here, but I think they stopped it. It was good.
I've seen it recently, and I don't know if that's advanced or not.
They every month they had different things, you know, not very basic things, like more advanced things. You know, like
I've seen them in here recently doing it. Yeah. I don't know how often, but I like to go to the MLS. Why? Because the teacher sticks around and it's stuck there all day long, and I can ask him pretty much anything I want. He is my captive audience. And I honestly think the guy who's there teaching the class most of the time is one of the best instructors. I forget his name.
Josh.
Is it Josh? Yeah.
He was here last time.
the same
But he's
teacher.
not here. He's not in MLS anymore.
Oh, bummer.
He's gone.
Well,
Josh is
everyone
the
there, their
guru.
customer service is like the best customer service I've ever dealt with. Call them, go to any of the classes. I think you'll like it. All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, guys.